Well, Greg, it's the time. It's the time of the time. So I'm gonna turn it over to you. Thank you for being here once again, and wait to see. Can't wait to see what you have for us. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for the intro and for the opportunity again. For everyone out there, my name is Craig Currim. I run Vice President of Engineering for Transit Security. I live here in the New York region. Been with the company for close to 7 years, so since starting up. And today we're going to talk all about the problem area that we're solving for, and that is passwords. What does it mean to actually replace passwords? And what does that do in the way that we perceive and look at identity going forward? So essentially, looking at it not only as increasing security, better user experience, but also as a business enabler. Okay, so let's jump straight into it. And a little bit about transmit security. When we came to be initially, we wanted to bring together two domains. Okay, the first is of course identity and access management domain. Everything to do with authentication, authorization, all of your identity components, as well as user experience. And when you merge those two domains, you really get something that we call identity experience. And so we've always been focused on this, and really with a direct focus on the customer identity and access management side. What I'm going to talk to you about today is, again, password replacement. What are the different techniques to go there? Why should we go there? And what do we have as Transmit in terms of solving that problem? Now, as a company, we've been focused on this. We pride ourselves on being standards-based. Our products are delivered as a service. And again, our focus is going native passwordless. You'll hear me talk about this through the session. The way we define passwordless is not using passwords less, but eradicating them completely from the user experience, from the browsers, from the cache, from the user store. And that's a lot different than just adding another type of authenticator on top of a password. It means right from the beginning of the life cycle, the registration process to the recovery process to everything else, never having passwords again. Okay. We're also going to talk about using techniques to, without the passwords, also strongly authenticate any user. Most importantly, doing it in a portable way where you should be able to do it if done correctly across any device and across any channel. And using all of those elements to really achieve real business outcomes. What does that do for you? What does that do for your users? And ultimately, how does that impact the business? Okay, so let's first start off with some data out there. And I think all of us know why passwords are bad, or we know that they are bad. But just to put some scale on there, okay, there's three areas I'll talk about. The first is on revenue loss. And I would say these numbers are actually a bit modest. They're actually higher than this. You talk about the different kinds of channels out there, or verticals, and even online shopping or transactions online. A huge amount of revenue loss is attributed to passwords. Why? It's just a painful experience, right? People forget their passwords. They forget their usernames too, by the way, okay? And many, especially since COVID, many of these different types of e-com sites are forcing people to log in. Why? They want to learn something about you, right? They want to get something from get some aspect of your identity so that they can market to you again and again and make the transaction process more secure. And when people are forced to do this, they just abandon, right? I don't remember my password. I don't want to go through all that nonsense. I don't want an OTP. I'm just going to go to another site. Okay, so large amount of revenue loss is attributed to this. Now, of course, tied in directly with that is higher support volumes, right? I forgot my password. I need help. I'm going to call in, right? And you think about those support calls, how expensive they are, how painful they are on the user, right? All of these out-of-wallet questions, waiting on hold, VRUs, all these different things you have to go through drive, much higher support volumes. Again, bad customer experience, bad, end user experience, and higher cost. And then finally, security breaches, right? Of course, virtually every kind of compromise you see out there today can be related back to some kind of a password dump of a database, a compromise, phishing attacks, you name it, okay? Very, very high rates, all attributed to password. And I'll say it even ties in with the middle number there, and that doing password resets and things of that nature, we see that as being a very, very strong vector for fraudsters to come in, try to impersonate the user and reset a password when it's really not that user. So that's another way that all three of these are kind of related. Okay, so lots of problems here, all attributing to bad user experience and lots of cost or lost revenue. In the past, right, it was always this kind of balancing act between, hey, customer experience or better security. And, we always talked about that and kind of tried to balance that out. And, at the end of the day, what's happening now? We're digitizing more and more. Everything is going online. And customers want things to be easy, right? We have biometrics everywhere, used to nice, smooth experiences on your social networking applications and so on. And people want effortless behavior, right? We want that good customer experience to minimize the drop-offs, to eliminate resets, right? We want to be able to do it in a better way where you don't need those anymore. Stop forcing the customers to continually change their passwords or reset them, and of course, preventing attacks. And on the flip side of that, you're going to gain all of the good things that come with doing that, right? Increased sales, lower support costs, better security, so you're going to eliminate fraud proactively. And of course, there's a savings behind all that. So when we look at kind of going to a passwordless world, let's talk about where things were. And up on the top here, this old way, when did other authenticators come out, on top of passwords? Well, they were done in the workforce, right? All of those applications that you access within your employee environment or behind the doors, right? Why? Because even if there's friction, even if there's a lot of steps to going or to getting authenticated, layered on top of layers on top of layers, they're employees. Okay, you're going to be forced to do that as an employee. User experience does not matter. Okay, so we had PIN cards, we had security keys, we had hard tokens, soft tokens. The point is, when you take that model and you start saying, well, maybe I'll try doing those things on the customer side, facing my customers, it just doesn't work. It doesn't scale. The cost is crazy. And the effort to re-provision, if something gets lost, you have a soft token on a device, for example, it gets lost, or re-provision or repurpose is very hard to do. So, what's been happening now, right? Well, we've been kind of getting this perfect storm with newer technologies, newer devices, and people love biometrics now, right? They're available everywhere on your iPhones, on your Androids, on your Macs, and your Windows. You've got, Hello, you've got Mac Touch, you've got all these things. And, fingerprint and facial ID is used by everyone. Gosh, my mother, who's 87 years old, she uses Face ID on her phone and she loves it. It's way easier for her than a password. And by the way, more secure. So better customer experience, much more secure, right? There's no password, there's no secret there that's going over the wire or being typed in. And you're able to get more information, right? And you're going to hear me say this a lot. Ultimately, where we want to get to, we're talking about authentication here because we're talking about biometrics, but what I'm really driving at in this whole story is getting closer to a better way of understanding the identity of the user, getting close to who that user is, right? So being able to verify not just, okay, the biometric matched, right? But what about other parameters, device, location? We can all get these things now if done properly. And really, we want something that's going to be appless, right? App-based authentication was a good step at some point, but it's predicated upon downloading an app and updating that app. And it's costly and it's painful. People don't want to continually download applications. So, we really want, and there are the tools out there today, you'll hear me talk about it, which allow this to be appless. Okay. So, let's define, when we talk about passwordless as a company, what does that look like? And it's what I said earlier, right? No passwords are anywhere in the process whatsoever. Not from the first time you're registering all the way through. Now, this is a new concept, as easy as that sounds, right? Because all of these different identity systems that you have today, they're predicated upon what? On user directory stores. And the foundation of that is, user identifiers and passwords. They're there. So, how do you get to that world where you don't need that anymore? Even if it's there, how do you not use it or not require it ever again from the end client, right? And how do you do that all the way through? So I've seen lots of customers. I had a customer early on at Transmit that said, yeah, we've implemented biometrics on an iPhone. It was actually a bank. And when I looked under the covers, all they were doing, right, the Touch ID or the Face ID is just leveraging a biometric sensor on that device, which, by the way, is done very well. There's a secure security subsystem on board, right? They have security hardware. It's called a secure enclave or a TPM chip on machines, where all that information is stored. But once I match that biometric securely, that process is secure, what am I using that to do after the fact on the device? And this one bank was basically releasing a cached password that was in the keychain. So that's not really passwordless, right? There's still a password going over the wire to the server, and where there's a password, there's problems, okay? So, our definition is nowhere in the process should there be a password, making the user experience or the customer experience much more convenient and much more smooth, okay? Now, why did we introduce MFA, right? We, in the past, we had passwords, obviously, we still have them, and let's make them more complex. Let's make you enter, 12 characters, 14 characters. Let's make it, uppercase, lowercase, other characters, and so on. But on top of that, we said, let's put layers on top because we know passwords are flawed, right? So the whole concept of multi-factor authentication was there because you let them in the front door with a password, and that's weak. And I always describe this to people as, I call it the cracked brick foundation, where if you're building a house, you've got a brick on the that you're starting with, and it's got a flaw and it's got a crack in it. Well, let's put another brick on top, it'll be stronger. Well, that has a crack in it too, right? And now you've got this false sense of security because you've got two layers, but they're both flawed, right? So things like OTPs over SMS or knowledge-based questions or CAPTCHAs, these are all hackable, they're all compromisable. And you're getting this false sense of security. By the way, at the same time, you're making the experience horrible for the end user, right? Yet it's another step. Yet you're treating everybody like they're not the person they are to prove who they are. And it's not even working well, okay? If we do passwordless in the right way, it will be effortless. Now, again, some more data, and I would say that this is modest as well, right? So when you look at what's happening in the industry, like I mentioned earlier, biometrics are appearing everywhere, right? On all the newer machines, you'd be hard pressed. I don't think you can even buy a smartphone today that doesn't have a biometric available on board. But these numbers were from some time ago. By 2024, I've heard numbers really around almost 3 billion devices will support biometrics, okay? And one very interesting statistic in the pie chart there is that according to MasterCard, who polled their users, 93% of their consumers would rather use something other than a password. In this case, they said biometrics, right? Because that's the easiest. But again, this all goes back to getting rid of passwords, getting something that's seamless and easy for the end users, okay? So what is making all this happen? We talked about, the different sensors and the newer hardware and devices that are commonplace now. Well, there's also standards that are coming out there. And some of you may have heard of the FIDO or know what it is, the FIDO Alliance. Others may not. So sorry for the people that are experts in this. But it's basically been around for a while, the FIDO Alliance. We're part of it. We're actually on the board of it. So lots of contributing members, Google, Microsoft, Apple, so on and so forth. And the purpose is really to change the nature of authentication and create a standards-based way of doing things that's much more secure, getting away from passwords in general, okay? The goals were to protect the user privacy, essential, right? Provide multi-factor authentication right off the bat, okay? So without an extra step process, how can we actually do that? Of course, leveraging native biometrics where possible, also since they're available on all the devices. And the beauty is, getting rid of those shared secrets like passwords, right? So think of all the different attack scenarios that you can just get rid of by doing that, right? Credential stuffing or dictionary attacks, bots, all those types of things, okay? So sounds great, right? I mean, FIDO 2, it's the way to go. So there was FIDO, most recently there's FIDO 2, and we're going to talk about something that is synonymous with FIDO 2 called WebAuthn as well, okay? But FIDO 2 itself, although it's a great option, it has its own challenges to implement it. And people that take on these projects understand this pretty quickly, okay? So it's a whole infrastructure on the back end that you have to stand up, okay? There are different things you have to do in your applications. There's the whole registration process. FIDO works on the concept of PKI, so there's key management that has to happen. There's registration that has to happen. So, enrolling the user. What about recovery of the user? What about tracking the devices and the associated keys? There's all of these different elements. While it's wonderful for security, and it is a standard, it's highly secure, all of the management components around it become very difficult. The other interesting thing about it is that it is secure, but it's also based on a one-to-one relationship. So it doesn't natively communicate between apps or channels. Let me give you an example. If I have two websites or two web applications within my organization, let's call them app1.mysite.com and app2.mysite.com, and I register FIDO authenticators, okay, for app1. Those are not going to be known to app2. I'll have to register again, okay? If I open a different browser, if I'm using Chrome and now I open Safari or Firefox, guess what? I'll have to register again, okay? So it's super siloed by the domain, by the application, by the device. We all know we have so many devices today, right? Especially, as it applies to the consumer world and looking at identity and solving the problems, we have to think about this. Everybody has iPads and iPhones and everything. So how do you do this across devices? And then, of course, as I said before, you do need dedicated server-side capabilities to manage everything, okay? So it's not so easy. Now, some things you should keep in mind when considering going to a passwordless world, are all the different scenarios you might have. And I touched on some of this earlier, but again, it's different than in the workplace. The customer-facing scenarios, right? You'll have, one-to-one, you'll have one-to-many. You might have many-to-one in a shared or a kiosk environment. Consider a hotel lobby, or you're inside a bank, or you're a place where there might be a kiosk as an example, or there might be a many-to-many also. So all the kind of diagrams that you see on the right-hand side here, okay? You also have many different ecosystems, right? Channels. You've got your mobile apps. You've got your desktop apps, PC, Mac apps, right? You also have devices that support FIDO through the protocol spec, and you have devices that are non-FIDO that might not support it. So I mentioned earlier something called WebAuthn. This is an interface that's part of FIDO2 that allows you to probe the device, okay, via the web, okay? So it's a web interface exposed out. And the newer browsers all support it, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. The newer operating systems support it, iOS, Android, Windows, Mac. But let's say you come with an older device that has an older operating system or something like that, and you can't use it, okay? Now, again, we talked about FIDO, but remember the main goal here. It's passwordless. FIDO is one element that we want to consider taking advantage of, and we do in our solution. But really, the goal is to go passwordless. So how do you achieve doing that in both a FIDO world where FIDO is available to you, those standards are available to you, and in a world where they're not available to you as well? And then, of course, the integration piece, right? What's this going to take to integrate? Now, another thing to consider is, I always talk about this word portability. You can call it omni-channel too, right? At two levels. One we touched on the last slide, which is users that have all those devices, right? So think about portability. I've got an iPhone, I've got an iPad, I've got, my Mac, and I log into an application, and you know who I am in that application. Now I switch devices, right? You don't know who I am anymore. So that's one aspect of portability. We want the identity to be portable. In fact, we can even learn more and get closer to that end user's individual identity if we understand what devices they use, right? So how do we do that? And then the second part is you have many different applications and channels. So portability on the other side, right? You have your mobile applications, your web applications, even non-digital stuff, right? So you might have call centers, or you may have branches or walk-in stores, whatever you have. Okay, how can we leverage that identity and make it portable, not only across devices for the end user, but across channels for the organization, right? How do I form an identity about Craig? Well, I really want to know what Craig does, not just in the mobile channel. I want to know what he does when he's interacting with all the different applications or aspects of my organization. then I can start forming a better picture. And by the way, I can give Craig a better user experience as well if I do that properly, right? Not an easy thing to do, but something that should be considered when moving to this new identity paradigm. So, lots of things to think about, right? But you also need to think about it from the customer's viewpoint, from the end user's endpoint, which is, what does that transition look like for my customers, right? I've got people that maybe are not so tech savvy or, come in, and people just tend not to like change, right? So how do I move to this world if I'm already based on passwords? First of all, like, what do I do with the passwords I already have? And secondly, how do I move away from that, right? How do I enroll users with things other than passwords? If biometrics are available, wonderful, right? But what about other techniques as well? Again, portability, right? What do you do with users with multiple devices? How do you enroll them across all of those? And how about your different application channels as well, right? And how do I, most importantly, provide the education or basically the promotion to my users, educating them properly so that they're not confused, that they understand by going to this new model, not only will it be better for them in terms of user experience, it's going to be much more secure as well. Okay, so this is something that you should be taking into consideration as well. Now, let's get some practical, meat to it, right? So, an example of I'm opening an account, all right, and the wrong way to do this would be, okay, let's, we've got this old way of doing things. It's a username and password, and I'm sure all of you have seen many apps today. You come in with a username and password. They'll say, oh, do you want to enable biometrics? And you say yes, right? Well, that biometric is only as strong as the password because you logged in with a password. So if I got your password, I can register my phone, my biometric, impersonate you, and game over. So enrollment, the initial enrollment, we call it linking of identity, should be a stringent process. Now, I'll say that with an asterisk, right? That it should be stringent, but you should only have to do it one time. In other words, once I understand that this person is really Craig on the other side of it, I shouldn't have to make him go through that process every time again. How can I do that, right? I'll put him through that process one time, and then I'll be able to recognize him and give him a better experience, from that point on. So this is really what we're moving towards, this kind of a model. And of course, as part of that, don't require anything else, right? Don't require an app even. How do you do it without an app? Now, step two, authenticate. So what does that look like when you're coming into the application? Well, you can provide a better user experience by providing stronger authentication, right? Think of biometrics, and especially as it relates to things like we have on the iPhone and the Android and all of that, right? You're going to use a biometric, and if you have implemented this properly, it's multi-factor off the bat. What are the two factors? The two factors are your device, right? And if you've linked that properly, you can repeatedly identify the device. And the second is your biometric. So it's something you have and something you are. And so if I let you in the door now with an MFA, do I need to step you up, right? If you're doing something else, maybe you're changing your address on file or doing something different. Theoretically, I don't have to, because I didn't let you in with a low degree of assurance. You came in with a high degree of assurance. So I can make your experience better and not have to challenge you again and again and again, okay? So if we look at this really and, do it correctly, you can cut your interdictions within the actual identity flows. You can make things look really easy and welcoming for the end user, and people will come back and visit with you more if it was easy, right? Think of a restaurant where you love the food. You'll keep going back there again and again and again. You love it. Well, the experience, if it's seamless, if it's easy, you're going to keep coming back again and again. Digital and non-digital, this is really important because much of the messaging out there, this term is being thrown around, and that's why I took time to define what passwordless means to us as an organization, because it's used so broadly. And many other organizations out there talk about passwordless, but they still have passwords behind the scenes, or they've introduced a biometric on top of a password, or they need an app, right? And to complicate matters, what about when you're talking about non-digital interaction? What about coming into the call center, right? And here's a very good use case. Call centers today, we see traditionally a multitude of different tools. Why? Because it's a high degree of fraud coming into the call center, trying to impersonate the user. So you have these voice signaling tools and voice authentication tools and all of these different types of things, and you're trying to use those. It's a very complex task, right? You're trying to orchestrate and use those in an effective manner. You've got some call center agent on the other side that's trying to do all of that, while at the same time minimize the call handle time, because call handle time is very annoying for the end user, and it's also very expensive for the organization. The more time that you spend, the more it costs you. So how do you use all of those tools that, by the way, you might have spent a lot of money on effectively? The answer is you don't, okay? It's a best effort. But what if you were able to leverage this highly secure way, utilizing mechanisms that are on devices today, utilizing a service where you could actually invoke it from a non-digital channel? Imagine, I'll show you guys actually a demo of this. Imagine you call into a call center and it does a lookup and you get a secure link on your phone without an app, right? No app. You click on the link, you natively use your biometrics, and those results are given back to the call center. And they know who you are right away, okay? That is what we want things to look like. You're actually using digital tools, but in a non-digital channel. And that's something that you should be thinking about. And again, not easy to do. The goals really are, to get closer. And I always talk to people about, how you can look at this, right? Think of, you're creating trying to form a picture of a user, and all these little pixels are starting to come together, right, to form that picture. And all of those pixels can represent data that you're learning about that user, their devices, their locations, how many times you've seen them, so on and so forth. All those things are coming together. Our goal is to get closer to that user identity, get closer to that picture, right? So leveraging other signals, how can we do that, right? Leveraging points of access across different applications, omni-channel, we talked about that too. Looking at the user's behavior across the different channels, right? Doing authentication in a much more intelligent way. And then basically with the ultimate goal of saying, you know what, I want to create this unified identity, right, for a user that is consistent across whatever devices that user has, whatever applications they access, and it's very tightly bound, okay? That's where I want to get to ultimately. So that's our goal, and that's what we're aiming to do as a product, and that's what we aim to do with our solution as well. So, just to kind of bring it back to, paving the way for users, we touched on this a little bit, but it's something I get asked all the time, and many of our customers that are moving to this new model, I would say that this is something that we have to work with them on, right? They want to pave the way. They want to introduce this in a way. By the way, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, okay? You phase these things and you allow customers to opt for them. And by doing that, there's 4 areas that you can help, right? So there's education of the end user, right? Banners on the site, mouse overs, there's different things you can do right in band that are giving the user information and saying, look, would you like to move to this new mechanism? We're going to link you one time. And once we do that, this is going to be easier for you. It's much more secure. Along with that, okay, incenting and motivating, right? Incenting is because you've been authenticated in a much stronger manner, we'll let you do more. We won't challenge you as much. And some customers are actually saying through motivation, they're saying, well, when people don't use this mechanism and they continue to use passwords, I'm going to let them do less, or I'm going to interrupt them more I'm going to make it more uncomfortable so that they move over to a place where everything is more secure for both sides. So there's different techniques that organizations can use and do use today. And of course, there's support, there's online support, and you can have different mechanisms, but it's really a function of, or how you do that would be a function of, some kind of a cost analysis. The best way to do it is obviously online, where it's self-service. Okay, and The one thing that we see also is that, there's a bad experience out there, right? If you're used to doing something and it's a really horrible way of doing things, but you're just used to doing it, it becomes normal for you. And now all of a sudden we've given you a better way to do something and it's easy. And, you scratch your head and say, well, wait a minute, is that safe? I'm not being challenged. I used to be challenged when I checked out or when I transacted, and now not anymore. Is it still safe, right? So goes back to the education piece, and you can do different types of things, but letting the users know, bringing them to a place where that becomes the new norm, where they understand that this is more secure, and it's stronger, and it's using biometrics. And by the way, it's completely private, right? All of those security standards, that FIDO standard that we have, it's all about privacy, which is huge now. So, all of those things come into play, but it's also about helping your customers understand this. Okay. So, lots of things to think about, right? What does it take to move to a passwordless world? What about the standards out there that you can incorporate? What are the challenges with doing that? And we're really getting to a place, just to summarize, where everything is coming together, right? You've got the hardware and devices that are commonplace that support these new standards. You've got the standards that have come into the mainstream that are being accepted by all the major manufacturers, software vendors. You've probably heard a ton of stuff on Microsoft around this, on Apple, and so on. Everybody is there, okay? And the question is, how do you actually get there? How do you get there in a way that makes sense, with being able to fill all those gaps I talked about, right? Across all devices, across all channels, across incognito browsers, right? Private browsing mode, so on and so forth, right? So what I'd like to do now is we did a lot of talking. Let's do some showing. So our service, we call it Bind ID, and we deliver this 100% as a SaaS offering. There's actually a developer portion of our site you can go to, and there's a playground there. There's a lot of information. But the beauty of all of this is it solves all of those gaps. Okay, provides a service that's super easy to integrate, standards-based, okay, can be implemented in any channel. And again, it's consumed as a service. So there's no infrastructure to deploy. There's nothing like that, okay? And the first one I'm going to take you through is a customer that's live now, one of our banking customers, actually, it's KeyBank. And I'm going to take you through a desktop experience, okay? So I'm going there, and this is a pre-registered desktop. So that one-time linking I talked about is done already, okay? And I want to log in to, do a check my balance or do whatever I do within the context of my account. So what does that process look like? I'm going to go play the video. I'm going to click sign on. The service is going to recognize my machine is registered. I'm going to be prompted for the biometric on my Mac. Okay, it matches, I'm in. That's it. Okay, so what did you see there, or what didn't you see there? You didn't see a password, but you didn't see a username either, right? And that is because this is not just authentication. This service is actually delivering identity as well, okay? So this is their experience now. Imagine what their users think, okay? So that's a desktop experience. Now, what I'll take you through is a mobile experience. And this is a mobile browser. Keep in mind, this is all appless, okay? So even though this feels like an app, this is really appless. This is on a mobile platform, but using the browser there. And by the way, it's fully, you can fully add it to an app as well. You can bridge it to an app. So a lot of organizations say, yeah, but I have a mobile app and I want to use that for the users that have it. No problem. In fact, it helps registration of that mobile app and makes that much simpler. So for example, if I have an app like with my bank and I go get the new iPhone and I download the app again, I have to go through the whole binding process again. With Bind ID, you don't have to. So I can still use the mobile app if I want and take advantage of the service. But this is what it looks like. It's even simpler on the mobile, okay? I'm going to click login. I'm going to be presented with the biometrics. Bind ID knows it's capable. I'm going to use Face ID and boom, I'm in. Okay, it's as simple as that. I'm going to show you a couple more here, okay? This one could be a flow where the desktop is not registered, or it could be a kiosk for that matter. There's so many different options here. You know, we only have a limited time. I can show you so many of these, but this one I like because it utilizes something that we're also familiar with COVID happening, QR code, right? We all scan in our restaurants for our menus now and so on. So imagine this to maybe not be your machine. Maybe you're on a guest machine, or maybe it's a machine you just haven't, linked yet. We have a way you can link all your devices securely. But over here, I'm going to click log on. And what you're going to get is the service will recognize that it doesn't know that device, but it does know the mobile. So it'll present the QR. I'll take my mobile that is registered. I'll scan the mobile. Again, it's opening a browser, not an app. I'm approving on the mobile using a biometric, and it bridges all that through and allows me to get to my session on the desktop channel. Now think of that, right? Think of keyboard loggers and all those types of things. Gone, right? I'm not putting a username. I'm not putting a password, nothing. Okay. And then last one, which I think is super cool, we talked about as well, which is call center. And I'll turn my volume up for this. Let's see, where is it? Oops. The volume might not work for this, so let me just go back into presentation mode. But it is a call center use case. So in this case, I'm actually calling into the call center, and it's an IVR, and it's going to automatically look up. There we go. There's a link. I'm going to authenticate. And that's all that you need, okay? That's it. I was able to invoke and use strong authentication on that device from a non-digital channel. Now, that's all great, and all you guys have been seeing different types of, authentication. But what are we actually delivering? And I think that this is the key part here. Remember, you didn't see the user ID or the identifier, right? So as part of the service, we're actually helping build the identity. And this is just a nice screenshot, but we're using standard protocols, OpenID Connect, and we're actually delivering information back about the end user, about the device, about the frequency, about the recency, about the usage, okay, across all applications. You can see as an excerpt, there's a lot more information in this. I'm just showing you a basic sample. But you can see on the bottom, total known devices for this user, 5. We've linked them in a very strong way to that user. And now you can link that user, this opaque identifier we have here, to the actual user and who that is on your side, okay? So it's not just about authentication. This is the part where we're actually delivering so much more around the lines of the identity itself, okay? Now, we've been deploying this and we've been highly successful, and organizations across every vertical are going to this. We're allowing them to roll out FIDO projects much faster. We're allowing them to roll out this new mechanism of passwordless in multiple channels with the least amount of effort. We're allowing them to do so many things and actually be proactive with things like fraud control and so on. And these are just some numbers. Again, they're super modest, right? We've seen some of the customers that failure rates for logins, greater than 40% reduction when they start using Bind ID, right? And remember, they haven't fully switched all the users through. They're phasing, right? Secondary authentication, not needed anymore. So they're saving it for those corner cases that are maybe really risky, but for the normal kind of transactions or operations that were considered risky when you let them in with a password, you don't need to do it anymore, okay? Account recovery. Why did you need account recovery in the past? You forgot the password. Well, you don't have a password anymore, okay? And even for a new device, there's ways we can link that super fast, okay? We can improve mobile app adoption. Remember, it's app-less. There's a mechanism in the product where you can actually prompt users. It's configurable in the product. Hey, would you like to download our mobile app? Click here, and it will take them to the App Store or the Play Store where they can download the app. So we can actually all tie it into the service, okay? Contact center, huge impact, huge, right? Much lower call center handle time, better identity assurance, and of course, the registration process becomes much, much easier. So the ultimate goal here was, hey, utilizing these new standards, utilizing the stronger way we're doing security to ultimately better the user experience and achieve those business goals, right, that are so important to everyone. So kind of the takeaways here, just to summarize, technologies come together, like now is the time. So everything is there for the taking. It's only going to go further, right? We're going to get more and more into non-passwordless requirements. There are organizations I'm dealing with today that they have mandates that they want to delete their password database in the next 2 years, like remove it completely. So it's all it is risk for them, okay? Getting closer to the end user identity, right? Following the user. Not having to reestablish identity, but getting much more of a broader view rather than just within the context of how the user is accessing that one channel or that one app. Who is this user as they're accessing network wide, right? And being able to track that in a very predictive manner. Addressing security, right? All of those kinds of, whether they're bot attacks or credential stuffing attacks or password attacks, addressing risk and fraud, right? And really, really having a much better user experience, not treating everybody like the criminal that we used to treat them as. And then, of course, all of this boils down to, that unified identity that we provide as a service, okay? So, last slide here, more of a closing slide, but just, it's happening, right? Everybody knows it's happening. You look at even Gartner, they've moved it up now. It's happening. I think they had it scoped for the next, 1 to 3 years. It's now the next 0 to 1 years. Like everybody's moving towards it. So what's the right way to do it? How much work is it going to take for you? And what are you ultimately trying to achieve across all your channels? Is it just a stopgap, or is it really something that you're going to do correctly that'll allow you to achieve all these goals? Okay. So that's it for me. I think I'm 9 minutes early. So I guess I'll pause there. And I don't know if there's questions, if the moderator wants to ask, or check me on my time, please, also. Is there a moderator?
Hello, Craig.
Yes.
Hey, we switched up. So I'm the pitch hitter here. And
okay.
Closing out for you. Thank you so much for your presentation today.
Thank you as well. We really appreciate the opportunity and allowing us the time.
Yes, absolutely. So just looking through the questions here, I don't want to ask any that may have already been asked. Just looking. Let's see, how is non-internet access addressed offline?
Yeah, good question. How are you accessing the app offline? Remember, this is customer facing, customer applications. If you don't have internet access, you're not accessing the app either. This is an online solution for online applications.
All right. Great. We have a thumbs up there. Any other questions? There we go. Is it possible for end users to have visibility to the identity profile you've built for each of them?
Great question. Absolutely. So there's a number of different mechanisms that are there. The first is that we actually have a bind ID user portal where users can go in there. Again, it's all about enabling the user. You're getting a new iPhone, you're getting a new device, you want to add one, you want to replace one. You can go in securely and do all of that. And that's completely separate. Now, that's great, but in the context of most users, when I think about people that are non-technical, even my family and so on, they will want to manage their identity in the context of the organization. So, for example, Home Depot, they're a customer of ours. Okay, I want to manage my devices as I use them with Home Depot, right? So the service exposes out APIs for that organization that consumes the service to be able to leverage all of those management tools and provide self-service to their users. So I would go access, a device management page in the Home Depot portal, right? And it would have all my devices, and I can do different things there, and I can look at how many times I've used the device, when's the last time I logged in, all of those things. So we provide it in two different ways. One is in the context of the organization you're accessing, and one is holistically as well.
All right. Great question. Great answer. Let's see. And a few questions in the chat. Okay, I'm going to look at the chat. I will ask everyone to please, if you have questions, put them in Q&A. Just it's a little easier to filter that way because there's so many congratulations and all these other great messages in the chat.
Well, look, also we're more than happy. I know we don't have a ton of time left, and I'll answer everything I can. But please, as you think about this more, you can certainly come back to us with more questions, and we're happy to follow up. So not a problem.
Yeah. Absolutely. And here we go. What do you do when biometrics fail? False negative.
Okay, so there's a number of ways to interpret that question. What do you mean by fail? Meaning they're not available, meaning the user has not registered them, meaning the user, there's a failure to match. Okay, so let's go backwards. If there's a failure to match, so we'll probe the device, and if the device is capable and a biometric is registered on that device and it fails authentication, your authentication fails, right? Because what are we doing? That biometric is the mechanism which you first registered with. Those keys were established with it. And if it's not really you, then you're going to fail authentication, right? That's what you want. If biometrics are not available on the device, we have a mechanism for that as well. We have other ways we'll authenticate the user passwordless, things like magic links over email. There's a whole bunch of different mechanisms, all configurable. And the beauty is, you might say, well, okay, but then that's not as strong as a biometric. You're right. It's still not a password, but the beauty is, remember that slide I showed you, the other information we give you back, we'll tell you how the user authenticated at that point in time. So yes, it was the device that's normally linked to Craig, but he didn't use biometrics this time. He used something else, and you can choose to treat that user differently, okay? And then, of course, if biometrics are not registered on the device altogether, just like an app today, you won't be able to use them, right? Think of a mobile app, but the beauty of this is it's appless also, right? You wouldn't be able to use them. In apps today, depending on the app, you could fall back to a PIN code, but again, it requires you to have knowledge and possession of that device, okay? So those are just three scenarios. Hopefully, I hit the answer with one of those.
All right. I think you certainly did. Let me see. I think there's another. Here we go. Okay, another question here. Passwordless appears to be slow due to not addressing offline scenarios. Log into laptop with no internet, assessing online app that works in offline mode like some PWA-based health apps. Internal applications when internet is not available equals downtime. I guess maybe that's a little more of a statement.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're not in that offline mode, nor are we in the desktop arena, right? Microsoft and Apple are handling that problem through Hello, through Touch. Those are the desktop vendors, the OS vendors, right? That's their domain. That's not our domain. Our domain is customer-facing applications. When you're online, when you're trying to access those customer-facing applications, not even in the employee world, those are different problems, right? We're not focused there.
All right. Great. And I think we have something in QA. I think we asked. Okay. Yep. Nope. I think we've addressed everything. All right. Well, again, Craig, we appreciate your time, expertise. Thank you for presenting and supporting this conference. And it's presentations like this that help make this so valuable to us all. So we really appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much again, Derek, and for everyone on that attended as well. Thank you for your attention and your questions. And it's again our pleasure to partake. So thanks for the invite, and we'll see everyone soon.
All right, we sure will. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.